Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Charlie Kerr, an actor, playwright, and musician who's all over the place at the moment. He co-stars in Chris Schuurman's psychotropic thriller Lost Solace, which just landed on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon Video, and he's also down at Toronto's Factory Theatre co-starring in After Wrestling, a new play he co-wrote with his friend and director Bryce Hodgson, whom you may know as Don E. from iZombie. Charlie picked Boy, Taika Waititi's wonderful 2010 dramedy about a kid in 1984 New Zealand who's given the opportunity to reconnect with the father he's never known, assuming it's worth the trouble. A lovely, vaguely autobiographical film with a great eye for kitsch culture and an abiding love of Michael Jackson, which might be the same thing now that I think about it, Boy has a marvelous melancholy tone and a deeply felt humanity thanks to note-perfect performances from James Rolston as Boy and Waititi himself as the long-absent Alamein. If you only know Taika Waititi as that weird guy who made Thor Ragnarok last year, well, this'll give you a different side. It's a chance to engage with his work in its purest form. I'm really happy we got to talk about it. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I think it is my favorite film. Period. I've always kind of, when asked like what my favorite film is, like I like refer to my top three as Boogie Nights, Empire Strikes Back, and Boy. But for something like this, I think Boogie Nights and Empire Strikes Back have found their audience and you know, with Taika on the rise and everybody kind of going nuts over What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People, and Thor, and then I'll be having a conversation with somebody and they'll be like, oh yeah, he's the best stuff. I was like, oh yeah, like, so Boy, that's the masterpiece, right? And they're like, what? So to me, it's also kind of his best film, I think. So yeah, I wanted to give it more of an audience because it's my favorite film, and as a writer, Bryce and I, my writing partner, that's he's our biggest influence for sure.
Really?
Yeah,
because he's such a. I mean, I'm equally delighted that Ragnarok now means that all of his movies have an average of like $200 million grosses, which just makes me incredibly.
It was great. It was. Bryce and I saw it like opening weekend, and we're just. I had this moment of like, I also really love Logan. I think that like we're getting to a point with superhero movies where the glass ceiling is so visible that people know that they need to do something different to even be a part of a conversation of filmmaking. And with Logan, or rather with Thor Ragnarok, it just felt like what a superhero should be, and he was just good at having, you know, stakes that we could get behind and jokes that were funny in world, and and just everything was just structured in a cool way, and then visually it was awesome. So I've been a fan of his for a very long time, and I guess I'm just like excited and proud of him that the success has been this gargantuan. Yeah,
and Boy was, I'm trying to figure out how to place this. It was incredibly successful in New Zealand. Like, it was the most successful film released there at that point. But outside of it, it kind of struggled. I know it opened in Toronto because I reviewed it when it did, but it was one of those things that had one theater chugging along for a little while. And I've screened it a couple of times. I screened it at Harbourfront a couple of years ago in the summer series there. And people showed up. People were either really interested and curious or bored. And they just came down. But they all enjoyed it. It was a good crowd for it. But it's one of those movies that is incredibly easy to explain and incredibly hard to sell.
Yeah, I guess
it was, anyway. Because now you could put the DVD out with from the director of Thor Ragnarok, which just delights me to no end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But it's a period piece. It's a family comedy. It's a drama. It's a coming-of-age story.
Yeah, it's a film about grief
Yep.
in a lot of really phenomenal ways.
It's autobiographical.
Yeah.
It's exaggerated. It really is him in a nutshell. Like it's
his soul, more or less, right? Like, and I think that he there's just so much heart poured into every frame for me, and like, it's gonna sound like sacrilege, but to me he does what, like, you know, what Wes Anderson desperately tries to do.
Okay.
I like Wes Anderson stuff as well, but that blend of happy, sad, and childlike, but yet as an adult you see, you're able to read between the lines and see how tragic the whole film is.
Yeah. So with Anderson, is it just the sort of the design thing that distances it a little bit? Because I find that works sometimes against his stories as well.
I really love his stuff, and I just remember watching Boy and thinking to myself, I can't quite place the style of this, but it kind of reminds me of the playfulness of a Wes Anderson movie, but for some reason this is just striking me more.
It's got the melancholy, like front and center. In fact, in a weird way, kind of Moonrise Kingdom after Boy makes sense.
Yeah.
Like in retrospect, there is a sort of twinning to it, and they're both nostalgic as well. They're both set in the past and about longing for a time that the author of the film can't recapture. Yeah. So when did you first see it? Were you lucky enough to see it in the theater?
I saw it on video on demand. I think it came out 2012.
10, I thought, but that might have been when it played TIFF, so it might have been a couple of years before it showed up on those platforms.
Yeah, I saw it on video on demand, and Bryce, my co-writer, and I were hanging out, and he, I think we just stumbled upon it, and he dated a girl from New Zealand for a while who swore by it, and because I think he and I both loved Eagle vs. Shark and some and the Flight of the Conchords stuff, and just kind of think that Kiwis are the funniest people on the planet. So we were up for it, and then we were just blown away by how good it was.
Yeah, it came at a point I remember being really surprised by it. I wasn't a fan of Eagle vs. Shark. I just thought it was a little too flat. And
I remember watching Eagle vs. Shark, and I think I was like the 9th grade, and I watched it with a girl I had a big crush on. So it, I remember really liking it, but not retaining too much of it, because the entire film was, more or less about my crush.
I can see that.
I was pretty distracted, but I've watched it since and realized all the incredible risks and beauty and heart in that film as well, because that film is on the money about grief. It's about Taika's character dying and how that's affected his friend.
Right. Whereas my first experience of it was, I just found Jermaine Clement's character so incredibly off-putting, just so gratingly arrogant. And yes, you're absolutely right. He has his reasons. Mm-hmm. But I was in the theater just going, I don't like him. I don't like this. I'm not enjoying this. And so when Boy came along, I was sort of braced to not like it. It just nailed it so fast. Yeah. The affectations, the Michael Jackson stuff, like all of it. And then you get Taika Waititi being just so... I've been trying to figure out how to describe his performance, because it's impenetrable, because the kid can't connect.
It's perfect.
But we connect.
Yeah.
We see his flaws. We see his reasons. And
and that's another thing that the film does so well is keeps Boy the protagonist, and the way he sees his father as this, swashbuckling hero, and then we see him on the phone being pretty much a pathetic alcoholic.
Yep. Yeah, pathetic is definitely the word I would go for.
But back to the Wes Anderson thing, like, his use of montage is similar. You know, it's less, like, structured, it's less, like...
Well, he doesn't have the rigidity that Anderson imposes on his frames.
But the editing is similar of, like, the scene where he talks about either his auntie or his grandma, and he's like, she has 6 jobs, and then it goes through each one, and it's like a small vignette of each thing. Like,
it's like Max's school clubs at the beginning of Rushmore.
Precisely. Yeah. And I think that is where like those thoughts stemmed from of mine, of the parallel between the two.
Right. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And they're both dealing with characters in various states of arrested development.
Yeah.
The way that it's about people who aren't really willing to engage with the world in any terms other than their own flawed methods.
And his arc is pretty... where he ends up at the end of the film is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And Rocky and I as a little brother, just like, Rocky is so well written in terms of just going off on his own and kind of playing by himself and not really remembering his mom or romanticizing his dad in the same way that Boy does.
There's that richness of character that understands that everybody has a life, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the only way I mean, it's not a new observation, but the idea that when characters walk off stage, they have something else going on, right?
Right. Which is often, missing. And
Wilder People gets it right, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Just that sense that everybody, even the cops,
yeah,
have weird little runners throughout the entire affair where they're dealing with something that we never even get to understand.
Yeah.
It's this weird tension between them over something else.
And I love that as a storyteller. Like, I love having the story itself just be like a quick glimpse into a world. But, as a writer and as an actor and as everybody who worked on the project, because of backstories and because of how rich they've made that world, more or less where everybody was at before the film started. Right. And after the film finishes, you kind of just get that quick glimpse into the world, and that's my favorite kind of storytelling, I'd say. Yeah. The slice of life kind of films where not absolutely everything is answered.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a sense that the whole world is involved.
Yeah.
That it's not just the characters that have wandered in front of a camera, that there's all this other stuff.
Right, yeah.
That, Boy's dad has had an entire life that we don't know about. And we never really understand. We just know it wasn't satisfying.
Pictures, yeah.
And here he is again.
Yeah, or the teacher who...
that's right.
Yeah, just, it's one of these kind of great setups where you think that maybe this teacher will be a father figure for Boy, because he sees, after Boy gets detention, he's vacuuming in the school, and a teacher walks out and sees what he's doing and kind of says something about his potential, and Boy goes, what's that mean? And the teacher just goes, I'm off the clock, and walks out, and you never see him again.
Yeah, which is sort of that perfect comic button that I assume comes naturally to him.
Yeah.
Because it's in all of his films, just these weird little, even his own role in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Hey, big pile of rocks, how you doing? It's delightful because he will do something, or he will find a moment in his narrative that really most people would cut at the script stage.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just too odd, or it's just too silly, or it breaks the tone. But then you realize that his movies are all about that. They're all about breaking the tone. They're all about just stumbling over things when a cooler moment would be cooler. He doesn't care. Like, he really wants people to be revealed as awkward and unpleasant and uncomfortable, and sometimes not seeing the bigger picture is the whole definition. Like, that's why things happen in this movie.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on that, just the sadness of the film is always just kind of like wacky.
Yeah.
Like, when Boy's getting bullied, and then his bullies show up, so Alamein gets on the rope swing with the machete to like threaten them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of swings back and forth and doesn't work out the way they wanted to, and the shot's held for a really long time, so you see him like get out and then chase them and stuff. And that's what, like, I watch that scene and I know it's funny, but it's so pathetic.
Yeah.
And I think that, or when he catches Boy in town wearing his jacket with the ice pop, and he kind of gets really flustered, and he hits him, grabs the jacket, and calls him a liar, and then he's so flustered by everything, and his performance is just so on the money that he's really able to get the sadness and the comic beats simultaneously throughout the film. It kind of works that way for every character, and it's I don't know, it's remarkable. Yeah.
I think so much of it too is about the neediness of the central relationship, which is that Boy wants desperately for his father to be the person he thinks he is.
Yeah.
And his father just wants desperately to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
And we immediately know he's not.
Mm-hmm.
He's nothing about him has confidence or posture. He fronts constantly, but he is really bad at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something, again, that that Waititi does so beautifully. Like in What We Do in the Shadows, where he's constantly apologizing to the camera with his eyes.
Right, yeah.
Because he's uncomfortable and sheepish. And
and
we talked about that when he came through Toronto a couple of times, actually. We talked about it. And it's so interesting to he just basically keeps falling back on, well, I thought it was funny. We did this. This was a version of Jermaine and me and our flatmates, and this is just who we would be if we were vampires.
Yeah.
And we'd get on each other's nerves, and it's like, you're right, you didn't think about this at all. That's why it works. He just threw himself in and followed the premise. And in Boy, while I don't doubt for a second that he thought about it very thoroughly and crafted the performance,
it does feel effortless.
It just does, right?
Yeah.
Like
the whole film feels incredibly effortless for how, in my opinion, how many things are just like nailed in like a very textbook way. It also manages to feel effortless. Yeah,
it's a really complex emotional storyline that feels like it was tossed off in a weekend.
Yeah,
and I mean, I'm glad I don't make movies, because I would be very frustrated if I saw this. It's like, God damn it.
Yeah, how do you do that so masterfully?
Yeah, and he doesn't really seem to sweat it. I mean, his collaborative nature, the stories that came out of the Thor set, he was just, he's running around in pajamas with dots on them because he's playing a CG character, still directing things and taking a moment and running lines, and
he seems really nonplussed for how much of a genius that I think he is. But it's hard for me to believe that that any of it is effortless.
Yeah. Well, there was a great New York Times interview with him when Ragnarok came out, and he basically just said that he was supposed to be intimidated by making a Marvel movie because it's massive.
Yeah. And
then he very quickly realized that there are people for that. Mm-hmm. Like, there are structures in place, and he gets to go play with his friends and bring the camera around and just, goof on jokes with Chris Hemsworth and Mark Ruffalo until they have a scene.
Yeah.
And I think that you can feel it in Boy as well. Yeah. That as serious as some of it is, as grim as some of the story points are, there is a playfulness and a sense of fun in the movie, in the very aesthetic of it, that lets you in on it and tells you it's going to be okay.
His performance and the character is, it's extremely good at, showing him as this hero that he is to Boy. Mm. And simultaneously none of the other characters who think he's, a pathetic, washed-up alcoholic. But also you have tons of moments as a viewer that you're kind of like, oh, but he's like really funny, and I'd like to hang out with that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to have a drink with him, and that's the other funny thing is how when his self-awareness pops in, like the way he apologizes, would you be okay with having a dad kind of like the Incredible Hulk? It's just, I don't know. I'm just blown away by how well they execute kind of us being put in boys' shoes and also kind of seeing the good in him and the charm in him. It's not unlike Denzel Washington in Fences.
Oh, that's an interesting choice. Yeah,
where you're kind of like, he's a really awful guy in a lot of ways, but you're kind of like, oh, but like he's such a good storyteller, and I'd love to have a drink with him, and it was a different time and we understand him.
Yeah, that's it, right?
But he's reprehensible.
It's knowing where it comes from.
Yeah,
that makes all the difference. And I think that's the other thing about Boy being set in the 80s too, is that we are instantly distanced.
Yeah.
And to my mind, if you go by the whole period pieces are framed by the storyteller, so we're watching Boy's memories as an adult, and his father's probably dead.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's been 25 years.
Oh, that's a cool take.
And I think, it occurred to me 2 or 3 times in just watching and thinking, yeah, this is a memory. This is a really sad memory that he's playing as beautifully as possible.
Yeah, right. Well, I was reading about the film before I came here, and Taika talked about how in growing up in his town, it felt like the kids kind of ruled everything, because the adults were all out gone, partying,
right, yeah.
And you were raised by your auntie or your grandma or what have you, and I think that's really potent in it, to me as well, is just kind of how that all works, and the way the kids operate in the film, I think, is really, really believable and charming and funny.
Yeah, we haven't really spoken yet about the child actors, which are at least as important, I think, and James Rolston, or Rolston, I think it's Rolston, is, he's fine. He shouldn't be that good.
Yeah, he's outstanding.
It's one of those things where you have as much fun as the grown-up actors are going to be, and as vivid as they can be.
Yeah.
If the kid doesn't work, the whole thing collapses.
Rocky as well.
And that's true.
Is so damn good. But I mean, if it's one of those situations where the film hangs in the balance of whether or not the actor who plays Little Alamein is going to be good, and he's unreal. Probably up until he's I think in the script he's 11. I don't know how old he is in real life, but he looks about 11. So it's pretty outstanding.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for his oh my god, I didn't know this. He was in a car crash in 2016, a life-changing car crash sustaining serious injuries, including brain trauma,
Jesus,
that has affected his speech and other characteristics, but from which he continues to recover with the support of family and friends. Thanks, IMDb. Jesus Christ.
Wow.
I did not know that. I knew he was in the Deadlands, 2014. That played Tiff as well, the Maori action thing.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it very briefly distributed, but it's a great, big, ridiculous action epic that he plays a small part in. I think it's on VOD by now.
Interesting.
It's worth looking up.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a child actor goes, especially in New Zealand, where, as far as I know, there isn't really much of a culture of
actors.
Well,
or like
child actors.
Yeah, and child actors.
You get a handful of movies a year if it's not Jackson Productions.
And that's the other thing that that I read about Taika was he was like, with Boy, he wanted to make a movie that was very New Zealand centric and not have it be hard to watch with its darkness.
Right.
Like he attributes the success almost to the fact that it is wacky and funny.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to give the wrong impression of the film that it's
dark,
depressing.
Yeah.
Because it's not. You can watch for that on the second or third viewing, but the first time it's just so well written and so kind of well made as a comedy that it all really works as well. And then also with the musical sequences combining the traditional like Maori and New Zealand music with old Michael Jackson videos recreated.
Yeah, that shouldn't work.
It's so good.
It really shouldn't work, but it does.
And then it also kind of comes down to the way, the performance of Little Alaman and the way he sees his dad is, it just works perfectly. And the one scene where they do the Beat It video and then it cuts back to real life and they're just getting shit kicked by another gang.
Yeah. There was that and Son of Rambo around the same time out of England with these two films where kids escape into culture and they're set in the 80s. So they'd go to whatever the biggest thing was. Right. It was Rambo I think Son of Rambo set in 1982.
Right.
And here, of course, it would be Michael Jackson. Mm-hmm. Because also he was a light-skinned black kid and the Maori kids would look right at him and see themselves.
Yeah, man.
And you also have, the lightness of it. I always wonder. I've yet to be able to ask him about this, but he would have come up as a young man, as an actor forming his own idea of how things should be. He would have come up right around the time that Jane Campion was the most famous person in New Zealand,
right? As
in terms of film, and her stuff was twisted and psychosexual drama. Sweetie, Angel at My Table, and especially The Portrait of a Lady.
Right.
These were aggressively weird films made by an artist without a lot of humor, and then Peter Jackson came along and he was already working into Hollywood by the time Campion really peaked. Yeah. But if those are your two influences, he's kind of dead center. Yeah, he's a wild artist, but very funny. And
one of his favorites is Hal Ashby.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And once you know that, you're like, oh, of course. Like Being There, Harold and Maude,
there's a lot of Harold and Maude in almost all of his films.
There's so much Being There to me in a character like whatever the dandy's name is in What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, Viago.
There you go. Yeah,
yeah, that's true. He really is. He's sort of just amiable, bland, and containing a vacuum. Which turns out to be horror. But
Yeah, and just affable and kind of just going around and
he's unfailingly polite.
Yeah, definitely.
Even from the werewolves, he's the one who doesn't want to fight with them. And, yeah. His films are so kind of uniquely the same. It sounds really odd, but there is a directorial signature, right, that runs through all of them.
You kind of know what the rhythm's gonna be.
Yeah.
And then other than that, it's really and it's gonna be kind of against the grain in a lot of ways. Like, certain things that wouldn't make sense in anybody else's movies make sense in his. Mm-hmm. The song that Sam Neill's wife plays on the keyboard for in Wilder People, or which just when that comes back, it's just heartbreaking.
I know, dude.
Yeah. All his films, though, man, like, I guess What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, the saddest thing in that is that someone can't have chips anymore.
Yeah, the biggest. No, that one's the most like kind of cut and dry. Yeah.
But it does
fun, but it has its stakes. I mean,
it has Viago longing for his lost love, and that pays off beautifully.
And the kind of homosexual allegory of the guy coming out to his best friend as a vampire. That's weighted in a cool way.
Everything he does is done with intent, right?
Definitely.
Even the smallest jokes are there for a reason.
Yeah.
And then in something like Ragnarok, where I was so delighted to see it get so weird, to sort of transition out of conventional superhero storytelling mode to a scene where it's basically bright green and yellow, and Mark Mothersbaugh's score is really just video game boops.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, someone paid $200 million for this, and I'm loving it. It doesn't matter that it's so strange. It fits.
I love that scene where Chris Hemsworth tells Mark Ruffalo, like, just don't think about the Hulk, like, don't think about getting angry. And then they go through that, like, festival of Hulk that's going on the planet, and yeah, it's just clever. It's just, he's just kind of the best out there for me.
Yeah.
And as an actor, I think he's, like, outstanding. So I don't know, like, I think that the next thing they're doing is We're Wolves, which is the spin-off of What We Do in the Shadows. But
there's also a pilot has just been picked up, I think, by FX or Fox for the cops in that world.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, it will be a separate project.
Oh, man, the cops crack me up.
Yeah, constantly. I can't imagine how it'll work as a series, but I'm willing to try.
Yeah, I mean, it's... Now, it's kind of like with some other filmmakers that I love, where now I'm just at a spot where I tell myself, that guy's got a new film, well, I'll be there opening day.
Right.
It doesn't really matter what the premise is, because I know they'll be making all the right decisions from inside that box, like Paul Thomas Anderson or
it's Soderbergh for me. I was doing this thing in the summer last year when Logan Lucky came out, and just now had me rank all of his films.
Oh, cool!
And I realized going through, it's like, I don't not like any of them.
Yeah,
like every single one of them. Maybe
Hardwire's tough for me.
Oh, I like it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's Haywire.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's his version of a Bond movie. So
right.
It's unsatisfying.
Yeah.
Which I kind of think is great. But
yeah.
Just the fact that the action plays out in long shots, and it's all about physical space, and he's such a cerebral intellectualizer of whatever he's looking at, that like Logan Lucky is the Ocean's movies with even less plot information.
Yeah.
He just still makes it charming. And there's a point in Logan Lucky where he keeps a blown take in. There's a moment where when they figure out which color cockroach has made it into the vault,
right?
He gets the call and he says something like Team Purple, and it's Channing Tatum in the trailer holding the phone, putting it down, turning to Riley Keough and saying Team Purple, and she goes yay and squeals, and then she laughs, and I'm sure that was the end of the tape. That's not supposed to be in the film, but it's so great, and it is a character moment. It feels like brother and sister for sure. He'll do that, and I think Waititi can do that too. He could get away with it. What Neil does in Wilder People is to crack the tiniest bit, because not because he's trying to be mean to the kid, but because he's not good with anything. Right. And he's lost his wife and his world is ending. Yeah. And everything he does is at this perfect level of cranky self-protection.
It's funny you should bring that up. Now, looking at the 4 films, Ragnarok aside...
Yeah, they're all about
a guy who loses somebody.
Yeah, they're all about loss.
They're all about loss.
I mean, maybe What We Do in the Shadows is about living with it more simply because it's about time. These guys are hundreds of years old.
But it's Svatoslav and his lost love, and what that's amalgamated into,
it's there.
And the other character with more or less a lost youth.
Yep.
And then and then Viago's lost truly the love of his life to timing. Yeah, that's really interesting. All of those films are just blatantly about grief. Maybe that's why I'm so connected to them, because I've been writing a play about grief for 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, we're about to put it up in Toronto at Factory Theatre. That's why I'm here.
What's it called?
After Wrestling.
And how did you spend 3 years on it? Or what made you spend 3 years?
So Bryce and I started writing in 2014. I had just gotten off, or just go a tiny bit back from that. Bryce and I have known each other since we were 10 and 12.
Okay.
Grew up with all the same people. Went to high school together, went to elementary school together. Then he graduated and went to acting school in New York. And then I graduated and I went to acting school in Vancouver. But we always kind of were at least hanging out, if not collaborating on little things. And at one point, I was playing CMJ in New York City with my band, and he was doing Deliverance off Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
He was starring in that. And so I saw him do Deliverance, and then he came and saw my band play the Bowery Electric. And then we kind of had this moment of like, we're two kids from Vancouver. This is a little ridiculous that like we got to do this. This is nuts. But felt kind of meant to be, and I can't remember, but we were probably crying. And then we both got home to Vancouver, and kind of, you know, he was back to auditioning for film and TV, and so was I, and we just kind of both felt like men without a country. Mm-hmm. And he came over, and we tried to work on music projects together, and we tried to work on maybe writing a film together or a sitcom together at one point, and he had this idea for a play, and he was like, do you want to write this play with me about two brothers? And I was like, yeah, I mean, that sounds great. And we wrote 20 pages of basically just us trying to make each other laugh. And I turned to him and I was like, this is where most people give up. And he was like, let's just keep going. And then it was 40 pages, and we wrote the roles for specific people. So we had those people over to do a read through, and they liked it, and they said, you know, if you want to put this up, we'll be in it. And you know, it didn't have an ending at that point. And
that's a nice amount of confidence, though.
It was cool. It was cool to know that, you know, at least we in that play were funny, because that's all that I cared about, honestly. Like, it was so important to me that we were making comedy, and, you know, we wanted to root it in real things and heartbreak and all sorts of things that really matter. So our characters had, you know, something to fight through, whatever. But it was really important to me that it was funny, because for some reason, Bryce and I, that's just a big litmus test, I guess. Right. It's just kind of, it is or it isn't, and they thought we were funny, so and then Bryce, being as gung-ho as he was just like, okay, we'll get this play finished, and we'll have it on stage in like a couple months. And sure enough, he and I worked on it every day, got the draft finished, and then reached out to a local church, and then put it on in a church basement for I think a couple weeks, and built our own set, and kind of had 30 people there every night, and it was a big hit, and people really liked it and encouraged us to kind of keep going with it. And while we were rehearsing it, Bryce and I were getting together and writing our next play, which was called Kill Your Parents in Viking, Alberta. And so I went and toured Europe while our first play, Piranha Club, was being put on.
Okay.
And so I only ever saw the dress rehearsal, but I thought it was great. And then I left, and then he told me kind of everything that went on after that. And we were kind of talking about Kill Your Parents and how that play was kind of shaping up. And then I came home, and we were doing a lot of read-throughs for Kill Your Parents, and we had our actors in mind for that as well. And Bryce was like, and it wasn't quite working. There's something that wasn't working about it that we couldn't put our finger on, and we pretty much felt like it was pretty much time to give up on the play. It just didn't work, or we didn't have confidence in it, at least. And then he pretty much said to me, I'm gonna move to Toronto with my girlfriend. I was like, okay, I mean, we'll make it work then. I mean, you know, we'll write something else someday. It doesn't really matter. You have your life, I have mine. Sure. And then really early on, we had a great connection and producer who took Kill Your Parents and submitted it to storefronts, open submissions, and they and we never thought they would take it. You know, we're completely unknown. At the time we were, I think, 24 and 26, and you know, it was a city that we did not belong to, and we were sending this, you know, play into the open submissions. So our submission had a whole bunch of jokes of like, if you choose this play, which you'd be crazy to, this is how we'd do it.
Right.
Sure enough, they wanted us to open their season. So they picked us, and then we got to cast it and direct it and build the set and stuff. And then through that, we broke a box office record for storefront theater, and it was, you know, it was considered to be like a bit of a hit. Kill Your Parents was a bit of a hit. Nice. And then you know, and then I went off and made more music. And the other thing is that I forgot to mention is after Bryce moved to Toronto, he learned that his role in iZombie, he played a character that died in the first season.
Oh, that's right.
And then they wrote him a twin brother. So, as a recurring character.
Right.
So then he had to make his life more about commuting from Vancouver to Toronto, because he kind of lived in Toronto but worked in Vancouver.
God,
and I was living in Vancouver, and excuse me?
I'm just saying, that would be hard. I've seen the show. He's in almost every episode.
Yeah. And so he and I, you know, basically on any day he wasn't working on iZombie, we'd talk about... Oh, 1 second, because the step that I missed is when we gave up on Kill Your Parents. Mm. Like, when we submitted it and gave up on it, we started writing After Wrestling.
Right.
Which came a lot from the real-life experience that Bryce and I both had of losing a friend to suicide. Specifically through paranoid schizophrenia.
Ugh. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So we both knew that story was in him in particular and needed to be told, and so then we started working on that. So on his days off from iZombie, we'd work on it, and it was just kind of a play that was on a grander scale than our other two. Our other two were one location, and one of them was 2 acts, but Kill Your Parents was 1 act, 1 location. Piranha Club was 2 acts, 1 location, but both of them was kind of like ongoing action. Mm-hmm. There was no like, it's the next day now.
Right.
I think in Piranha Club there was like 15 minutes between Act 1 and Act 2. Like as long as the intermission would be. But Kill Your Parents is just real time, 45 minutes. And After Wrestling is like weeks and months, and, you know, very much plays with time and is like 6 locations. It, again, in the same style as Taika, it's a very... Our play is a very dark comedy.
So it's that intersection of grief and laughter.
Precisely, and I think that's... And now, saying it out loud, I'm realizing how the parallel has worked. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I mean, that does cover the closing question on the podcast, which is, you know, is there something of Boy that you've borrowed or absorbed or you know, taken into your own creative DNA? But you kind of covered it.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, just storytelling to me, like, in this is gonna be a bit of a tangent, but in acting school, basically on the third day or so, everybody, the faculty and the students included, have zeroed in on who are the kids who get to do comedy.
Right.
Because they have the timing of ba-dum bum ch, they look the right way, or they can do voices, whatever it is.
It's that theater kid thing where you're just irrepressible.
Yeah, right? and I was able to make my family laugh. Like, I had, in my opinion, a good, like, turn of phrase. I loved comedy, but they didn't see me that way whatsoever because I didn't have that kind of timing or what have you, whatever. They didn't think that comedy was meant for me, and then so I really, really, for a long time, thought, like, I am a dramatic actor. I will do the heaviest parts possible. There will be nothing light about it. There will be no brevity. That's what I do. That's what I was told I was supposed to do. Boom. And then a trip to LA and a whole bunch of, like, things going wrong later. I was kind of faced with this moment of I should probably quit acting. If the average person got the feedback that I just got, they would quit forever. So I looked in the mirror and I was bawling and I was sleep deprived and I was totally fucked up. Well,
as you would be.
Yeah, it was heavy. And it shook my confidence for like a year. But what was really important about it was I, through that, zeroed in on giving up this idea that of who I should be according to 5 people as an actor and as an artist. And then I was like, you know what? I like making people laugh, and that's gonna bleed into my characters, whether people think I'm funny or not. And so it's just important, and it's just important to me that things have humor and that stories have humor. And I guess that brings me to, like, what I love so much about Taika, and what I can take from Taika is how, you can have these seemingly very dark stories and with kind of enough wackiness and levity, it gets to be this thing that kind of goes down pretty smooth.
Yeah, and certainly, if nothing else, he's demonstrated that being true to your own weird impulses
precisely
is the only way to do anything.
And I mean, that's
can't
true generationally. I mean, like, Jack Nicholson got on stage after he won an Oscar and said, like, my manager told me that, like, I didn't have a future in this. And being strange, being against the grain, it looks really off until it's adopted by everyone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
well, we recognize some part of ourselves in the completely alien somehow.
Yeah.
In the things that he's doing in New Zealand in the 80s that I have no connection to whatever, except for Michael Jackson music, which, yeah, there you go. That's your way in.
Yeah.
And then you just say, oh yeah, well, there's a Beat It sequence. You just go see the movie. And people, like, nobody told me they didn't like it.
Yeah.
All the people I forced it on.
Yeah.
He does that somehow. He makes a comedy about vampires, and it makes sense. He tells a story about this odd couple of an old man and a young kid who have literally nothing to say to each other.
Yeah.
And he makes it play. And he just, I still, maybe I'll take another look at Eagle vs. Shark sometime, but...
And then he takes...
And then he takes Thor
and Thor and reduces them to people with insecurities and kind of like Arrested Development kind of emotions, and he gets at the humanity of everything he touches, and that is so admirable in a storyteller.
My thanks to Charlie Kerr, who you can see on stage at the Factory Theatre in After Wrestling, which he co-wrote with director Bryce Hodgson. Previews start this Saturday, February 24th, and the opening is next Thursday, March 1st in Toronto. Factory Theatre. Look it up. You can also listen to his music as Matt and Sam's brother, starting with the first album, My Brain Hurts a Lot. I found it on eMusic. And go watch him in Lost Solace, too. I saw it at the Canadian Film Festival last year, and it stuck around in my head. You should check it out. It's available wherever you get your digital entertainments. Thanks also to Jen Gorman. She knows what she did. You can find Charlie on Twitter at MattandSamsBro, all one word, no apostrophe. And you can find Boy on DVD in Canada from Mongrel Media and on Blu-ray and DVD in the US from Kino Lorber. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. And if you missed Thor Ragnarok last fall, it's available on digital today and arriving on disc in the UK this Monday, February 26th, and in North America, March 6th. Keep an eye out for the Rockman. He's awesome. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcast, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps. It truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.